sing with my harmonium, if that's okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Jashodanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Jashodanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Jamuna Tidavanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Jnanatimarandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachulam Pongam Langayate Kirim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam. Hare Krishna and good morning, dear devotees. Thank you all so much for being here. Good to see all of you for this Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Let's go and pull up the verses that we are reading from. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10. Excuse me, Hare Krishna. Govinda, Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 20. Still on the rainy season and autumn in Vrindavan. What a beautiful season. Verses 47 to 48. Okay, so we're very close to the end of this chapter, this time together. Let's go ahead and finish it off. I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen here for us. So description of the autumn season. So 47, 48, and we have just a couple verses left. So verse 47. Udahrishan varijani suryotane kumudvina pragyatu nirbhaya loka yatadasyun vina nirpa. O King Parikshit, when the autumn sun rose, all the lotus flowers bloomed happily, except the night blooming kumut. Just as in the presence of a strong ruler, everyone becomes fearless, except the thieves. Hare Krishna. O King Parikshit, when the autumn sun rose, all the lotus flowers blossomed happily, except the night blooming kumut. Just as in the presence of a strong ruler, everyone becomes fearless, except the thieves. Hare Krishna. Surya means the sun. Okay, there's a couple of verses that immediately come to mind in terms of the rising of the sun. Any verses that come to mind for anybody? Specifically thinking of within the Charitamrita verses, there's a couple that about the appearance of the Lord like the rising of the sun. There's also Bhagavatam too. Anybody have any references or verses that come to mind when they think of Krishna and the sun? There's of course Krishna Surya Sama Maya Hoya Andakar. His famous one. This is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita 22nd chapter of Madhya Lila. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Hoya Andakar Yahan Krishna Tahan Nahi Mayara Adikar. Krishna is compared to sunshine and Maya is compared to darkness. Wherever there is sunshine, there cannot be darkness. As soon as one takes to Krishna consciousness, the darkness of illusion, the influence of the external energy, will immediately vanish. There's also very, 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 very famous. There's this verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. As the sun and moon drive away darkness by their appearance and reveal the nature of everything, these two brothers, despite the darkness of ignorance covering the living beings, and enlighten them with knowledge of the absolute truth. So there's also the idea of, and there's also the very, very beginning, I think, of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the more famous verse. The opening verse, this verse right here. Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Godadhaya Pushpavantao Chitrao Sandao Tamonudao. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Shri Krishna Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, who are like the sun and moon. They have arisen simultaneously on the horizon of Gauda to dissipate the darkness of ignorance, and thus wonderfully bestow benediction of all. So we have reference of Shri Krishna being compared to the sun, Krishna Surya Sama Maya Hoya Andakar. We have reference of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being like the sun with his brother Nityananda Prabhu. And we also have the Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna se damo bhagate dharma jnana disaha kalo nashta drisham esha puran arko dunodita. Arka means the sun. There's actually a store just down the street from the Bhakti Center called Arka. It's right off of, it's on 2nd Street, right between First Avenue and Avenue A. This Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So we can read this purport also, would be extensive, but just basically whether it's Krishna himself in the Chaitanya Charitamrita being compared to the sun, and that wherever there is sun, there cannot be darkness. And as soon as we invite Krishna into our life and take to Krishna consciousness, the darkness of illusion goes away. We have the likening of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the sun, along with his brother Nityananda, like the sun and the moon. And they've arisen simultaneously on the horizon of Gaudadesh to dissipate the darkness. And later on in that same chapter of Adi Lila and Chaitanya Charitamrita, talks about like the way the sun and the moon drive away darkness by their appearance and reveal the nature of everything. These two brothers dissipate the darkness of ignorance, covering the living beings, and enlighten them with knowledge of the absolute truth. So now we're seeing that light dissipates shadow and darkness, just the way that knowledge dissipates ignorance. And the root cause of suffering, as described in Vedic philosophy, is avidya. It's ignorance. And so the knowledge of our true self and the knowledge of our relationship with Krishna, when we think about suffering, it's relating to a false understanding of what I am. Suffering generally refers to less about the circumstances taking place, but rather the meaning I ascribe to those circumstances and the feelings that I ascribe to those circumstances as a result of it. Making a mistake doesn't cause us to suffer, but the feeling of being a failure or the fear of rejection caused me to suffer. The feeling of regret, the feeling of anxiety around something. And so it's the stories that we create in our mind that create suffering. And so similarly in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have this Bhagavat Prana being as brilliant as the sun. It has arisen just out of the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision. We also said every morning before we recite class, Om Jnana Timirandasya, Jnananjana Shalakaya, Chakshur Unmilitanjena, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. And when we've lost our vision to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali, we shall get light from this Purana. So Sri Krishna himself, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, and the Shastra, specifically in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam, all giving us light, and dissipating darkness. Into our verse, it says that light creates fearlessness. Srila Prabhupada himself was given a name by his father, Abhay. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Abhay Charanandavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And so Abhay wasn't just, his name wasn't just Abhay, his name was Abhay Charan. And his initiate is given the name Abhay Charanaravinda. Fearless at the lotus feet of the Lord. And so what does it mean to be fearless at the lotus feet of the Lord? What does it mean to be fearless standing in the sunshine of Krishna's presence in our life? It means that we have the confidence that Krishna is going to take care of us. It means that when we are separated from spiritual life, the anxiety of material life is the feeling of being alone. It's the feeling that I'm ultimately on my own. It's the feeling that nobody gets me. It's the feeling that I might be rejected. It's the feeling that at the end of the day, I'm on my own. And when we come to Krishna consciousness, when we step deep into our spiritual practices, it's proportionately rebalancing that scale to remind ourselves that Krishna is always with us. And when we read the Bhagavad Gita specifically over and over and over again, the message to Arjuna from Krishna is that I'm with you. I'm with you. Just surrender unto me. Surrender unto me. Put yourself in my hands. Come closer to me. Have faith in me. Have trust in me. Simply act under my direction. And we find great examples of our acharyas in our life having to make this. This came up a little bit in our Sunday Bhagavat Shravana. Dina Bandhu Prabhu and Mangalarti made this really, really wonderful point that throughout the history of our acharyas, we find them having to take extraordinarily extraordinarily tough choices, sometimes seemingly alone. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur took sannyas in front of a picture of his Guru Maharaj, Gaurkishore Das Babaji. So Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj departed from this world before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati took sannyas. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur taking sannyas was quite a remarkable act for him to take, because till that time, there were no sannyasis in our movement. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, but he took sannyas. There were no Vaishnav sannyasis at that time. It's known, we know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas in a line of Mayavadis. Obviously, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself wasn't a Mayavadi, wasn't an impersonalist, but those were the only lineages that were giving sannyas. Otherwise, in our Vaishnava movement at the time, people would take Babaji, which was more of a complete removal from society. Sannyas was more of a wandering mendicant that would preach and that would go to villages and share spiritual knowledge. And so, we have pictures of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wearing a sika, but actually he didn't have a sika because he had a full shaved head, because that was the line in which he took it. And why did he do that? He did that because he recognized that he wanted to gain a certain social level of respect for people to take him seriously. There was the example when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after he quote unquote became a devotee, after visiting Gaya and meeting his guru, he would come back and he was chanting the name of Gopi, Gopi, Gopi. And somebody began criticizing him and saying, who is this sentimentalist chanting the name of Gopi? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew that he needed some societal respect in order for people to take his mission seriously. And that is also an instructive for us as devotees, that when we want to if we want to be of influence in other people's lives in a positive way, we need to carry ourselves in a respectable manner. We need to present and carry ourselves in a respectable manner, so that our message can come across and be taken seriously by other people. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu understood that, so he took sannyas. But his direct followers, who were the direct disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? There are 6 of them, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, as well as others. The 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan did not take sannyas. When you look at pictures of the 6 Goswamis, granted they didn't have Polaroids back then, but if you look at paintings, you'll see that they're wearing white khadi cloth, white dhotis and white chadors, because they had taken more of a not sannyas, but more of a different type of renunciation. And so it wasn't until Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that his father Bhakti Vinod Thakur took Babaji. You look at our lineage before that. It was more of a complete renunciation in terms of a Babaji initiation, and it was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur who decided that he was going to take sannyas, meaning he was going to don saffron robes, take a sannyas name, and dedicate his life to outreach in that regard. Granted, our whole line was dedicated to outreach in a way, writing books and etc. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his guru was not a sannyas, Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. And so Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj had departed from the world. And when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur took sannyas initiation, he took a picture of his Guru Maharaj, sat down in front of a picture of his Guru Maharaj, created a sacrificial fire, and offered himself sannyas initiation through his spiritual master who had departed, who was present in the form of that picture. And so in one sense, he was completely alone. But at the same time, he felt extraordinary connection to Krishna and to his spiritual master. And so, because he had welcomed in that son of Krishna's life. And how did he welcome in that son of Krishna's life, in Krishna's life? He had spent 9 years chanting intensely in Mayapur. 9 years eating once a day and chanting, 192 rounds every day? It's very intense. Not something that any of us can necessarily imitate or should even try. But the principle is there. that he very, very, very intensely welcomed in the Son of Krishna's presence through the holy name and through his bhajan into his life. And the result of that was that he felt an extraordinary sense of Krishna's presence in his life, to the extent that even he could make extraordinarily difficult decisions, but not feel alone in any way. And from that came extraordinary empowerment for him to do amazing and wonderful things. Srila Prabhupada also, you can imagine the feeling of Srila Prabhupada stepping onto the boat of the Jaladuta, completely alone. The only person that was there was his young son, Vrindavan Day, who, was a young kid, and actually I don't know how old he was, if he was a young man or a young kid, or I don't know how old Srila Prabhupada's son was, but it was just his son. And Prabhupada, you can find pictures, again, not photographs, but you can find paintings and retellings of Srila Prabhupada walking onto the Jaladuta completely alone. And it wasn't like he was, stepping onto a Carnival cruise ship, stepping onto a freight airline with his luggage and completely alone. And people telling him that you're going to die, you're wasting your time, going to a place where he speaks the language, but with a heavy accent and no money. But he felt complete shelter and presence of Krishna in his life. And so therefore he was fearless. The fearlessness of Srila Prabhupada to step onto the boat of the Jaladuta. And that fearlessness doesn't mean that he thinks everything is going to go his way. Srila Prabhupada had 2 heart attacks on the boat. But fearless meaning that I place my hands in Krishna's, I place my life in Krishna's lotus hands. And I trust that Krishna is going to be with me. And I trust that I don't need to let my ego run the show anymore. And I need to let go of the idea that things are going to go a particular way for me. And like all of those just petty insecurities and doubts and fears that really have nothing to do with my spiritual life and my soul and my connection with Krishna, but just are all related to just all the fears of my ego not getting what it wants. People not liking me the way I want them to like me. People not appreciating me the way I want people to appreciate me. The material comforts that I'm hoping to have that may or may not come the exact way that I want it to. Like all of those fears can just, at least if they don't go away completely, just get a little bit smaller. And I can start to really feel Krishna's presence and trust that, you know what? Krishna's got this. Krishna's got me. I don't exactly even know where he's taking me, but I know he's got me. I know he's got me. And that's the ultimate message of the Gita, right? What's the last instruction of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita? Sarva dharmam pratyaja mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksheshami ma suchaha. Don't fear. Don't worry. Somebody once told me that the most repeated command in the entire Bible is fear not. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. And there are so many beautiful stories and examples throughout the Bible that talk about the idea of God extending his hand down and taking care of his devotees. And so Krishna gives us the same instruction that don't worry about anything else. Just stay close to me. Just your job is just to make sure that you open yourself to receive the sunshine of my presence in your life, and you will genuinely become fearless. And I think a lot of the times where we get confused is that we think coming to spiritual life means everything is going to start working out for me materially. And it's just not the case. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite. Krishna starts arranging for some of our crutches to be taken away. Krishna really presses us and be like, do you really want just me? And we find this example even in the stories of Vrindavan, where Krishna really, we have the stories, some of the most esoteric stories in our lineage, the stories of the gopis. And Krishna Gopijana Vastrahari is a name that Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings about in his morning songs. All the various names of Krishna. Vibhavari Shesha Aloka Pravesha. There's that beautiful song. Vibhavari Shesha Aloka Pravesha Nija Chari Utto Jiva Bolo Hari Hari Mukunda Murari Rama Krishna Hayagriva Nashimavamana Shri Madhusudana Brajendra Nandana Shama Utanagatana Kaitabashatana Jaya Dasarati Rama Yashoda Dulala Govinda Gopala Vrindavana Purandara Gopi Priya Jana Radhika Ramana Bhuvana Sundara Bara Ravanata Makanataskara Gopijana Vasrahari Prajarara Kala Gopa Vrindapala Chitahari Bamsidari. And the song goes on. Gopi Jana Vastra Hari. Gopi Jana, the Gopi Jana, the people, the gopis. Vastra means clothing. Hari, he steals. He's the thief. And it says here, he steals the hearts. He stole the gopis. As Ramachandra, he brought about the end of the demonic king Ravana. As Krishna, he stole the gopis' butter. He stole the younger gopis' clothes while they were bathing in the Yamuna. He's a cowherd boy of Braj and the protector of the cowherd boys. He steals the hearts of all and always holds a flute. So he's revered as Gopi Jana Vastrahari. Why? Here's the story. And if we don't look at this story through the eyes of the devotion, it can be very bewildering. But first of all, I mean, we're having the autumn season, right? The autumn season in Krishna. We celebrate the autumn season in the month of Kartik. And the month of Kartik begins with the full moon of Sharadiya Rasa, the full moon of the fall season, where Krishna calls the gopis to come and perform the rasa dance with him, right? So he comes to perform the rasa dance with him, and he calls them with his flute in the middle of the night. And the gopis leave everything. The gopis leave their homes, they leave their occupations, they even leave their families, everything to go and be with Krishna in the middle of the night. And the interesting thing about that is that there's no turning back. You know, once you leave home and go back, the shame and the tarnishing of a reputation that comes from that, there's no recovery. And so the gopis left everything, knowing that there was no turning back, and I'm completely leaving myself in Krishna's hands. And so there's a story also later on that when the gopis were bathing in the Yamuna, and they put their clothes on the banks, and Krishna came along and he saw their clothes and he hung them all up into the trees. And then he waited for them to come out, and they started to come out. They're like, where's our clothes? And then Krishna started calling them from the tree branch. And he said, I'll give you your clothes, but you must come one by one. And they're like, okay, Krishna. Krishna, constantly playing tricks on us, Krishna. Why are you doing this? Because you have to come one by one. You don't huddle and protect each other. One by one, you have to come. And so they would come, and they're coming out of the water like this. And he's like, no, you can't come like this. Bring your hands above your head. And they would completely come out of the water, completely exposed, literally naked before Krishna. We have this phrase, standing naked before God. This story literally exposes the truth of standing naked before God. And the purport, the understanding of it is that in order to reveal ourselves to fully, this idea of exposing ourselves to the Son of Krishna in our life, that we can't hold anything back. That we literally have to completely 100% be willing to let go of any form of, what is the story of Draupadi? The story of Draupadi, an assembly of all those kings and assaulters, people that were assaulting her, tugging at her sari, trying to disrobe her. And it wasn't until it wasn't like Krishna could have come in and done it at any time. Krishna could have saved her. And Krishna didn't even need to supply an unlimited sorrow. There's a number of things Krishna could have done. Krishna could have just transported her out of there. But it wasn't until Draupadi finally let go of her sorrow and threw her hands up into the air that Krishna just reciprocated and fully, now I'm going to completely step into your life. That fearlessness that, you know what? I'm not holding on to anything else. I'm fully, completely placing myself in your hands. I'm letting go of the sorry. I'm going to completely surrender and give myself to you. And so sometimes Krishna takes the exact opposite of things starting to all of a sudden work out for me materially. But Krishna starts to actually poke at our attachments a little bit, poke at our insecurities a little bit, test us a little bit, how much we're ready to completely place ourselves in his hands. We find stories in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, and the stories of Krishna, and in the Bhagavad Gita itself, Arjuna's complete breakdown before he completely surrendered himself to Krishna. So when Krishna says, "Don't worry, masuchaha," in the Bhagavad Gita, he's not saying, "Don't worry, it's all going to work out materially." He's saying that your deepest fear, and what is the deepest fear? Krishna speaks about this deepest fear in the Bhagavad Gita also, when he says in 240, he says, Nahabikrama nashosti pratyavayo nivijite swalpam apyasya dharmasat trayate mahato bhayat. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, meaning the endeavor of uncovering our true self and exposing ourselves to the light of Krishna's sunshine. And a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Trayate mahato bhayat, the greatest fear. And what is that greatest fear? The greatest fear is that I'll be lost forever. The greatest fear is not that what's going to happen with the stock market, what's going to happen in my relationship, what's going to happen in my career, what's going to happen in my health. Those are fears, but they're not the greatest fear. The greatest fear is the loss of our soul, the feeling of disconnection from Krishna. And so Krishna is saying, I'll protect you from that fear. And when you feel protected from that fear, you join the flow of grace flowing through our acharyas, like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who in some ways was completely alone, but at the same time completely feeling the presence of his guru and our parampara and Sri Krishna's life. Srila Prabhupada, who stepped onto that boat completely alone, but was more connected than we could ever imagine. So when the autumn sun rose, all the lotus flowers blossomed happily, except the night blooming kumut. Just as in the presence of a strong ruler, everyone becomes fearless, except the thieves. And so let's see, there's some chats here. Oh, so many beautiful things happening in the chat. Fearlessness is not surety that things will go my way, rather overcoming the false ego to place our lives in Krishna's hands with complete trust. Somebody's quoting the Psalms, the book of Psalms in the Bible. He delivered me from my fears. I sought the Lord and he answered me. He delivered me from all his fears. Beautiful. Somebody's saying, so let go and let God. So where is our endeavor? How do we know the balance? That's a good question. Where is our endeavor? And I think nobody can answer that other than us. We know when we're selling ourselves short. I mean, where's the endeavor? Srila Prabhupada got on the boat. What more endeavor can there be than that? What more endeavor? The gopis, they got out of the water and they walked towards Krishna one by one. And so I think we ourselves, one of the most important things in our spiritual life is the self-assessment to know when I'm being lazy and when I'm selling myself short and when I'm, when I know something needs to be dealt with internally, but I'm just not ready yet, but I'm making my way there. And so we have to make the endeavor. The sun is always shining. We have to make the endeavor to step ourselves and put ourselves in the sun. And that's one of the things that I always reflect most on spiritual life is like, this isn't for anyone other than you. I appreciate you all coming to class, but you're not coming for me. You're not coming for anybody else. Like, we're all here because I want to develop in spiritual life. And I think the most important thing that we as a community can understand for ourselves is that each and every one of us has to take responsibility for our own spiritual life. We have the support of a beautiful community that comes together to support us. Like, I couldn't do it on my own. If there was no kirtan on Tuesdays or Thursday nights, it'd be a lot harder. If there was no Bhagavatam class here in the morning with all these devotees coming from all over the country and the world, it'd be a lot harder. If there wasn't so many beautiful devotees and pujaris, whoever's on the altar right now, whether it's Champak or Gaur Sharan or Nandini Radhika or Nayana Mandri or whoever it is, or Vasudev, taking care of the deities, it'd be a lot harder. But I'm benefiting from the hard work of other devotees who I just have to open my Zoom screen and Radha Mulidar are right there for me to take darshan and bathe in the sunshine of their mercy. I just have to walk in the door on a Thursday night kirtan, and there's beautiful kirtan going on, and I have the opportunity to be performing the Yuga Dharma. There's so many service opportunities that I can have physically or remotely. So yes, devotees are making that available, but it's ultimately, we each have to take responsibility for our own spiritual life. And when I find devotees struggling with feelings of like oftentimes not being cared for or feeling like they're kind of floundering, sometimes it's because I've placed my spiritual well-being in the hands of others and I'm expecting other people to do the work for me. The reality is that nobody can keep me from coming closer to Krishna. I need devotees to support me. I need Sangha. But at the end of the day, I have to take responsibility for my spiritual life. And I'm coming to class because I need it. I'm coming to Kirtan because I need it. I'm doing service because I need it. I'm choosing not to criticize and to see the best in other people, not because I'm supposed to be the bigger person and I'm going to feel shame if I don't, or people are going to shame me or this or that. I'm choosing not to criticize because it's like a poison in my heart. Because the lotus flower of the heart contracts every time I criticize somebody else. It's really important for us to take it seriously personally. We have one more verse that we need to get through, which is usually the longer verse with the purport. And if I don't finish, then the Bihari is not going to invite me back. 10:20:48. Pragraya Indriyascha Mahotsavai Babao Buk Pakva Sasyadya Halabhyam Nitaram Hare. Translation. We've got 4 minutes. In all the towns and villages, people held great festivals, performing the Vedic fire sacrifice for honoring and tasting the first grains of the new harvest, along with similar celebrations that followed local custom and tradition. Thus, the earth, rich with newly grown grain and especially beautified by the presence of Krishna and Balaram, shone beautifully as an expansion of the Supreme Lord. Purport. The word agrayanai refers to a particularly authorized Vedic sacrifice, and the word indriya refers to folk ceremonies that have somewhat worldly objectives. Okay, so we're seeing the difference between authoritative Vedic instructions and more just folklore. Srila Prabhupada comments as follows: during autumn, the fields become filled with ripened grains. At that time, the people become happy over the harvest and observe various ceremonies such as Navana, the offering of new grains to the Supreme Personality, Godhead. The new grains are first offered to the deities in various temples, and all are invited to take sweet rice made of these new grains. There are other religious ceremonies and methods of worship, particularly in Bengal, where the greatest of all such ceremonies is held, called Durga Puja. Hare Krishna. So in all the towns and villages, people held great festivals, performing the Vedic fire sacrifice for honoring and tasting the first grains of the new harvest, along with similar celebrations that followed local custom and tradition. Thus, the earth, rich with newly grown grain and especially beautified by the presence of Krishna and Balaram, shone beautifully with an expansion of the Supreme Lord. think I've told this joke once or twice. Brahmatirtha Prabhu tells this joke about somebody looking for a parking spot. They're late to a meeting and they're driving a car and they're looking for a parking spot. And they're like, oh God, please help me find a parking spot. Please help me find a parking spot. Please help me find a parking spot. And just as they're praying, this light shines from the heaven onto this open spot right in front of them. And it's like a miracle. And after seeing that, the person says, oh, never mind, God, I found one. And so the idea of offering the simplest things back to Krishna, that sometimes part of the reason why we struggle so much is that Krishna is showing us that we are ultimately products of mercy. And that when things start to come together, it's extraordinarily important that we carry the realization that I'm a product of mercy. And that, yes, my endeavor is there, but ultimately Krishna is carrying me. And when things come my way, have I developed the muscle to first offer things back in gratitude to Krishna, and acknowledging Krishna's grace and mercy in my life. And so the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna's doubts and illusions and despair was dispelled, it wasn't like, oh, I got it now, I'm going, and thank you, Krishna, and I got this now. But it was like, okay, wow, I'm going to remember Krishna's presence in my life completely at every moment, that my strength comes from Krishna. My wealth comes from Krishna. My knowledge and realization comes from Krishna. So let me constantly be, so we have the process of arti, the process of service, the process of giving back. It's like, it's a way of physically creating ritual around the idea that like everything comes from Krishna. Let me give back to Krishna. And so as we're entering this rainy season of Vrindavan chapter, and everything is returning to life, and everything, there's vegetation, and there's all this beauty coming back to nature and to Vrindavan and to our lives, let us remember that first we should offer everything back to Krishna, and we should keep that remembrance in our lives constantly. Okay, Hare Krishna, it's 8 o'clock. Thank you all so much. I don't know if we're having darshan or if there's any questions or comments or Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you, Dayal Gauranga. Great class. It's darshan time.
There goes the conch shell.
We see Gopal Krishna blowing the conch. I was picturing Jeffrey Eckler Prabhu getting out of the water and walking to Krishna. Krishna's got you, Jeffrey Eckler Prabhu. Adipusha Prabhu, there's no sound. Okay. Wonderful class. Jamuna Jai, good seeing you. Bhim Prabhu, Amish Prabhu, everybody. Thank you. Dayal Gauranga, oh, he just tuned out. I had a question. Oh, Krishna. All right, I'll wait till next Tuesday to ask my question. Okay. Jamuna Jai, would you like to reflect?
One of the things that Dayal said early on in the class is he was commenting on how we behave, how we hold ourselves and stuff like that. And I'm always remembering, I forget, was it last week in the class that someone said that kindness is preaching? And that has really stuck with me. And something that I was thinking about, I know as a yoga teacher, sometimes I'm like, oh, what does it really matter because I am pretty picky about the way they align their bodies. What does it matter? What the heck? Do whatever. It's not about the body anyway. But something that my guru Dave said that I remember, he said, yes, but Jim Jai, if you're expert in the teaching, they'll believe you about the other stuff. And I was thinking, if we are kind and caring, then they'll believe us about the other stuff. If we're real jerks, then they're like, what are you guys about? So just being expert in how we conduct ourselves gives us a footing in other people's eyes that they will believe us about the other stuff, which is really, like Raghunath Kapil says, the main thing. So I just was really keying into that when he was talking. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Jamuna Jai. Yeah, don't be a jerk. If you're a jerk. I mean, you can be a jerk. Be kind. Thank you, Jamuna Jai. Okay, would anyone else like to reflect? Share? Yeah, Krishna's got us, dear devotees. Krishna's got us. We're all on the boat, crossing over the ocean of material existence. We're all on the same boat. We're all in the same shoes. We're all in the same barn with Bhima Prabhu, and we're all in the same car with Amish Prabhu. Where are you going, Amish Prabhu? How fast are you driving? Okay. All right, dear devotees, we love you dearly. Have a wonderful day. Keep going with your service. Be kind with your friends and animals, everybody, with your spouses, with yourself. Krishna's got us. Wonderful message from Dayal Gauranga. Krishna's got us.